Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carter.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carter. Today is April 11th, 2026, and tonight's episode is all about QAnon tested, prophecy pattern, or psychological operation. Well, this broadcast is not built on rumors, documentaries, or secondhand interpretations. It may have used to be, but not anymore. It is built on the original QAnon posts themselves, preserved across verified archives and examined in sequence, beginning with the first drops in October of 2017 and moving through the final posts in 2022. This program tests the claims exactly as they were written, using their own dates, their own wording, and the real-world record beside them. The goal is not to argue with QAnon and its believers, but to examine it the same way any truth claim should be examined, by whether it came to pass. Right? Now, the earlier drops are clear, direct, and one-time specific, making them ideal for testing. The earlier drops. Predictions of arrests, military operations, and coordinated events are placed alongside the historical timeline to determine whether they occurred as stated. As the investigation progresses, the structure of the posts is also examined, showing how the language shifts from verifiable claims to interpretive prompts, and how mechanisms like disinformation is necessary, which is what we were told by Q, and future proves past change the burden of proof from the source to the audience. Now, what emerges is not just a list of failed or fulfilled claims, but a pattern, a system that evolves in response to its own outcomes. It's been a while since the Q drops. Almost 9 years? Well, this broadcast then moves into the expansion phase where real-world events such as investigations, resignations, and public scandals are woven into a larger hidden narrative. These events are acknowledged where they are legitimate, but carefully separated from the broader claims made about them. By doing this, the program avoids both blind dismissal and blind acceptance, focusing instead on what can be demonstrated versus what is assumed. You guys are shown how real information can be used to support an unproven framework, and how belief can continue even when the expected outcomes do not materialize. And finally, this investigation reaches its most critical point in the 2020 election and its aftermath, where the long-promised culmination of events is tested against documented reality. Statements of certainty are placed beside actual outcomes, allowing you guys to see clearly whether the system delivered what it claimed. This is followed by a full synthesis of the pattern revealed across the archive, showing how the movement began, how it adapted, and how it sustained belief over time. Throughout the program, Scripture is not used as decoration, but as a measuring standard. Claims are tested against the biblical instruction to prove all things and to judge a word by whether it comes to pass. The result is not an emotional argument, but a structured examination designed to restore discernment. Now, this is not about attacking those who believe Q and the Anons, but about understanding how something convincing can still be false and how truth must be tested, not assumed. Now, last night I was talking to a person on TikTok, and they were true, full, strong believers in Q. And they mentioned, well, haven't you seen the debt clock? Well, I happened to do research on it. I found out it was a lawyer in Northern California who is a Christian who believes in the Q movement, and he's the one that made it. And people are using this as evidence. But the world debt clock, the website itself, it's not a government agency. And so we have to really discern here, especially 9 years after its beginning, to see if this stuff is something worthy of continuing an investigation on or dismissing it as propaganda. That's what we're going to learn tonight. I'm looking forward to it as well. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. Number one warrior is Scorpion. Scorpion says, hey, Pastor and Warrior family. Thanks for being here, Scorpion. Number two warrior is the Boots after himself, the Spleaking Sparfer. Hello, James and Warrior family, says Boots. Hoping everyone is all right. And try out elitepotion.com. Yes, that is my award-winning detoxification program. And Boots finishes with, if we could all help out our host by hitting that thumbs up button, that'd be great. Yes, if you could do me a favor, follow my thumb as I go down to my phone. Go with me. Hit the X button, then hit thumbs up, and then hit the live chat. You won't lose your spot, I promise. Thank you for being here. And number three warrior is Robert Gertison saying, hi, everyone. Let's take a QAnon deep dive. Absolutely. Well, guys, I found the archive of all of it, the original archive of all the Q drops. There's over 5,000 of them. And if they're legit, and they're truthful, it should stand, right? Remember, we're not the truth isn't afraid of fear. The truth isn't afraid of lies or deception because it holds its own. So after talking to this guy who was convinced about Q and the Anons and how the white hats and Trump are all taking the world over and they're going to get rid of the baby eaters and the blood drinkers and the ritualites, we've got to get grounded here, okay? So I'm looking forward to tonight's show. Let's get into breaking news.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
JD Vance says, no deal reached after a marathon session with direct talks with Iran and Pakistani officials. All right, well, strike one. But hey, has World War III happened yet? No. Has China helped Iran? No. Has Russia? No. So what are you worried about? America jumps into countries and blows shit up all the time. Eric Swalwell abuse claims are investigated by a Manhattan district attorney. Well, that's what happens when you play in politics. The best thing to do when you're in politics, don't go to parties. Trump touts newly released plans for DC Triumphal Arc. It's coming. It's happening. It's going to be the new king. I mean, that's what happened from all of the other arches that are like this one when they were put up over time. Someone conquered the world. And I think Trump is saying, I'm going to be that guy. Well, if they erect it, then take it seriously, folks. U.S. says 2 naval ships transited the Strait of Hormuz for mine clearing. So we're in there now with our Navy, and we're clearing mines. So things are getting ready to move. And all I can say is it's hurting China and Europe more than it's hurting the United States. Sure, our gas went up $1. Oh man, that $20 a month could have gotten me 2 shots. No, actually less, probably 1 shot at a bar. But we're all complaining. Yeah, well, that's what happens when your heart isn't aligned with God and you allow these leaders to take control. That's what it is. U.S. says, we already said that. Hungarian election rivals Orban and Magyar make final push for votes on evening. Okay, or whatever. Hungary, and I guess in Hungary there's an election going on, and it made national news. U.S. intelligence shows China taking a more active role in Iran war. Active role. Active role with what? Money. No, it looks like they're supplying supplies to Tehran, just like have been doing all along. This is the New York Times trying to say that, we found more information about China and they're giving more supplies to Tehran. Okay. All right. Yeah, that really that's intelligence, all right. US intelligence. Yeah. I just don't buy it. We bombed the shit out of Iran last year. Remember? We did. Did World War III happen? No. We bombed the shit out of it again this year. Did World War III happen? No. You see, globalism is dying. And now it's breaking up into fragments. And this is what it looks like. Okay? It doesn't mean globalism is dead, but it's at its last door. Only a few are holding on, like Canada and Carney, because he's a globalist. That's what globalists want. But Trump, well, he made a wreck of the globalist stuff. Probably because he probably recognized that having all this money in one spot and you know, one world government like I don't know, the International Monetary Fund or the Bank for International Settlements or the World Bank, having all this control maybe isn't such a great idea. Let's pull out. And that's what it looks like is happening. We are pulling out of paying for all of the globalist shit agenda. All right, when we come back, we're going to be breaking down the QAnon mystery. Well, I tested it. Is it prophecy pattern or a psychological operation? Well, tonight you should be convinced of what it is.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
I'll give you $10,000 if you can find just one person who's never filed a tax return.
I'll give you $10,000 if you can find just one person who's never filed a tax return.
Have you ever filed a tax return? Yes.
Nobody. Not one. It starts at 16. That first job, that first form. The moment they became a taxpayer. Every April 15th, millions keep signing the same contract, thinking it's the law. But it isn't the law that binds them. It's the signature. 98% of Americans never owed it. Learn more at unincorporatedassociations.com.
All right. QAnon. And its agenda. You guys, if you've been following me since my introduction to Rumble for the past 2 to 3 years, you know that I jumped off the Trump train about 2 years into the Biden administration when they decided to raise our debt ceiling again, another $4 trillion under Biden. And I was like, because Q said Trump's in control and Biden's just a mask, he's a puppet. Well, if that's true, then America would focus not more on spending, but hunkering down on the spending. But it didn't happen. And then when Trump came back as president, he added another $4 trillion. This doesn't make sense. We're going to soon be 41 trillion in debt, and we only make a total of 29 trillion. That's as of data from 2024. I haven't seen the data of 2025 yet because that's just recently been released, but only 29 trillion. Maybe America now makes maybe 31 trillion. I don't know, but only 29 trillion, and we owe 34 trillion. Well, that's upside down. You can't operate or borrow money. And how we borrow money is we sell bonds. Okay? Well, for a long time, nobody was buying bonds up until we took over Venezuela. And then bam, bond market's back. Gold was on its way to go over 5,000 and then it stopped. And then the dollar devaluation stopped. Well, they sealed the petrodollar with Venezuela, the number 2 largest oil reserves in the world. We went in with our technology and forces and told them what to do. But everyone's been telling me, you flip-flop. That's not a good pastor. Well, I thought a good pastor is repentance. When you thought you were correct, when you thought you had enough sources and information to back you up, and then you do a serious hard search and find out that you were wrong, repentance means turn away from that old information and give the new. That's what I've been doing. And recently I've been accused of being a flip-flopper, saying that my information isn't reliable because I can't stay in one direction. Well, how can you stay in one direction when you are in what's considered an informational war? Where misinformation, disinformation has been out there so much, propaganda, where I've been proving has completely conditioned and brainwashed us into believing things that aren't even true. And when I went down and studied the Old Testament between the Ethiopian, that examination, I started to find hard stuff that worked on my heart. Where I'm like, so it's the people's hearts. When they change, then God changes the leadership. So I started to focus on my heart. And what I'm giving people should not be lies or misinformation or disinformation. It should be backed by truth. And last night when I was watching this guy tell me that I'm wrong about Q, fine. I told the guy, I hope I'm wrong about Q. Because that means that there'll be Nasera Jacera. We're all going to be billionaires. It's going to be a whole world where no one will abuse the money that they get or spend it. But tonight is not about mocking anyone. And it's not about proving someone wrong. And it's also not about standing above anyone who once believed something that felt true at the time. Because I thought back in 2017 when the Q thing came out, I thought, dude, this has got to be the truth. Only because I wanted it to be. In fact, tonight is about something much simpler and much harder. Tonight is about testing something we were told to trust. Trust a plan, bro. Trust me, bro. Well, there was a time when a lot of people, good people searching for truth, people tired of lies, were drawn to something called Q. It came into a world that already felt broken. Governments were not trusted. Media narratives were collapsing. Corruption seemed obvious, but the full picture always felt just out of reach. And then suddenly, here was a voice claiming to have access, claiming to know what was really happening behind the scenes, claiming that justice was not only coming, but already underway. And for many, that felt like relief. It felt like finally someone was pulling back the curtain. Finally, there was a plan. Finally, the chaos made sense. But there's a difference between something feeling true and something being true. And that difference matters. What we are doing tonight is not based on what people said about Q. It is based on documentaries, or it's not based on documentaries or opinions or what someone on social media claimed it meant. What we are doing tonight is going back to the source itself, the original posts on 4chan, then later to 8chan, the actual words, the dates they were written. And we are placing those words next to what actually happened in the real world. Because it's been 9 years. That's long enough to see fruit come into fruition. Like, remember when Hillary was supposed to be arrested? Didn't she just recently appear before Congress to answer questions about frazzle drip? No interpretation first here. No assumptions first. Just the claim and the outcome. Because what we're doing is we're placing those words next to what actually happened. Because truth does not need protection. Truth does not need to be reinterpreted every time something fails. Truth can be tested. And if it is real, it will stand. Now, I want to say something clearly before we go any further. This is not an attack on you if you followed this. This is not an attack on anyone who believed there was something there, because I believed it. In fact, the reason this matters is because many of the instincts behind it were not wrong. The instinct that corruption exists, it's real. The instinct that powerful people hide things is real. The instinct that truth is often buried under layers of deception, that's true. Those instincts are real, folks. Scripture itself tells us that the world operates in darkness and that deception is part of the battle we are in. But Scripture also gives us a way to test truth. It does not tell us to follow voices that cannot be questioned. We're supposed to test the spirits if they enter our room. It does not tell us to protect ideas when they fail. It tells us to prove all things. Prove all things. It tells us that if something is spoken as truth and it does not come to pass, it was not from God. It tells us to be watchful, not just of obvious lies, but of things that feel right while slowly pulling us away from discernment. 3 years ago, I didn't use that word very often, discernment. Now it's in almost every one of my lectures. So tonight we're going to do exactly that. We're going to take the first drops of Q, the ones that were the clearest, the ones that made specific claims with specific dates, and we are going to place them side by side the historical record. Then we're going to follow the posts as they evolve. We are going to watch how the language changes. We are going to watch how the system adapts. We are going to look at the real world events it attached itself to, and we are going to ask one question over and over and over and over and over and over again. Does it happen the way it was said it would happen? If Q was a prophet, they would be, well, there's that knock again. If Q was a prophet, he would be, I want to say inaugurated, but that's not the right word. Vindicated. Did it happen the way it said it would happen? Not did something similar happen, okay? Not did something happen years later that could be connected? Or did it happen the way it was claimed? Because that is the test. And if we are honest with each other, real honest, which is something I've been trying to teach you guys to be, that is a test we should be willing to apply to anything we believe. Not just Q, not just this topic, Everything. What you are going to see tonight is not complicated because it's not hidden. It is not something that requires special knowledge to understand. It is simply the record laid out in order with reality beside it. And I didn't just test one group of Q drops, right? I got multiple ones and compared them to make sure we had the original one. So the question becomes, well, once you see it that way, the question is no longer what Q claimed to be, but the question then becomes, what was it really? What was this phenomenon? And more importantly, how do we make sure we never mistake something like that for truth again? Trust the plan, eat your popcorn, all is right. Well, there are some people who see that America never really fell or anything, that it looks like some people went down, that it looks like justice kind of is being served. But was it Q? Or was it because so many millions of people believed it that a lot of the stuff started to come true? As we learned from the CIA, that we all collectively are the ones that control the future. Now, before anything can be tested, we're talking about proving the source. Are these the real drops? The source itself has to be established. If the data is wrong, then the conclusions will be wrong. So the first question is not whether Q is truthful. The first question is whether we are even looking at the real material. Okay, you can find the material on the CIA's website. You can find the material on the Department of Justice website. It's no joke. You can find the material on blogs and all kinds of other stuff. It's everywhere. The actual 5,000 some odd drops. Now, Q did not publish books. Q did not speak on television. Q posted anonymously on internet message boards. And the first posts appeared on 4chan on October 28, 2017, shortly after the account moved to 8chan. And after that platform was shut down in 2019, the posting continued on 8kun. That progression matters because it creates a timeline. If an archive does not reflect that movement, it is not reliable. So the archive being used in this examination contains 4,966 posts. That number is not random. Independent researchers, journalists, and public archives have placed the total number of Q drops in a range from roughly between 4,953 and 4,968, depending on how duplicates and deleted entries are counted, but roughly around 5,000. Now that means this data set falls directly within the accepted range, a data set that I found and got. And if it's not missing large sections and it's not artificially inflated, then we're on to something. Now, there's also another layer that strengthens this. Q used something called trip codes. Trip codes. These are cryptographic identifiers attached to posts on anonymous boards. Think of them as a kind of signature. Even though the identity behind the account was hidden, the trip code allowed readers to know that posts were coming from the same source. And over time, those trip codes changed. And those changes are part of the historical record. The archive preserves those transitions in the correct order, matching the known timeline of when Q moved between platforms. That's extremely difficult to fake consistently across thousands of posts. Then there is the cross-verification. The wording, the numbering, and timestamps in this archive match what is preserved in independent public records, including Internet Archive and widely cited reconstructions like QAnon.pub, QAnon.pub. These sources were built separately by different groups using different methods. And when multiple independent archives match, it's not a coincidence, it's a corroboration. So the most important check is the earliest drops. The first 50 to 100 posts are the most quoted, the most scrutinized, and the most preserved across the internet. If an archive were even altered, this is where it would show immediately. The wording in this dataset matches those early drops exactly, including the first claims about arrests, military action, and specific dates. Now, that tells us the foundation of the archive is intact. So what does that mean for this show? Well, it means we are not dealing with interpretations. We are not dealing with secondhand summaries. We're dealing with the actual recorded posts as they were written, preserved across multiple independent sources and aligned with the known timeline of where and when they were published. So I didn't just grab an archive that was shit, that had a little bit of shit in it or wasn't accurate. I did my due diligence and compared it to others. And that matters because from this point forward, there is no place to hide behind, that's not what Q said, or that's not the real version. We are testing the real thing. And that also means whatever conclusion we reach will not be based on opinion. It will be based on the record, okay? Because I'm not about opinion anymore. I'm not about rumor, and I'm not about propaganda, lies, or gossip. I just want to know what the fuck's going on. Now that the source has been established, we move to the first phase. Any truth claim should be tested, where it is the clearest, because not all the Q drops are equal. Later on, the language becomes layered. It becomes interpretive. It becomes something people have to decode. But at the very beginning, there is no confusion. There's no symbolism. There's no need to guess what is being said. The opening drops speak plainly. On October 28, 2017, the very first post appears. It does not ask a question. It does not suggest a theory. It makes a direct statement. Hillary Clinton will be arrested on October 30th between 7:45 and 8:30 in the morning Eastern Time. It goes further and says her passport will be flagged, that extradition is already in motion, that there will be massive riots in response, and that the National Guard will be activated across major cities. That's its first post. Well, that's a starting point. Within that same day, the second post raises the level of certainty. It does not say an arrest is coming. It says Hillary Clinton is already detained, not arrested yet. It then directs attention to Huma Abedin, asking where she is and telling readers to follow her. Well, there is no longer a prediction about the future. It is a statement about what is happening in the present. Back then. But from there, the next few drops build on that same scenario. The expectation of riots is repeated. The idea of military involvement is reinforced. The National Guard activation is presented as something that can be verified by asking members directly. So in other words, the audience is not only told what is going to happen, they are given a way to check it. Then just a few days later, the timeline is extended. On November 1st, a new claim is introduced. The first arrest, now shifted away from Clinton, is said to be tied to John Podesta. The Post states that action is scheduled to occur on November 3rd upon the announcement of his arrest. The next day, November 2nd, that claim is escalated again. The drops say that November 3rd will be a big day, that National Guard deployments will begin, and that this moment represents what is called the calm before the storm. Well, at this stage, everything is still pretty clear. We know what's going on, but did it happen? Well, there are names, there's dates, there are expected events and results, and there is no need for interpretation because the claims are already defined. An arrest is not symbolic. A military deployment is not symbolic. A date is not symbolic. And this is exactly why this section matters more than anything that comes later, because this is where the standard is set. If a voice begins by making direct, time-specific claims about real-world events, then that voice has established how it should be tested, not by how it feels, not by how convincing it sounds, but by whether those events happened the way that they were described. Before we even move forward, it's important to recognize what has not happened yet in the timeline that we are examining. Now, there's been no shift in language. There has been no mention of disinformation. There has been no suggestion that things will only make sense later. There has been no call for interpretation or decoding. So at this point, the system is not asking for trust without evidence. It is offering evidence in advance. And that means the next step is very simple. We take these claims exactly as they were written, and we place them beside reality. Not reinterpreted, not adjusted, not explained away, just tested. Now we take the next step, and this is where everything becomes clear. We are not adding interpretation. We are not adding opinion. We are simply placing the claims we just heard beside the historical record and asking one question. Did it happen the way it said it would happen? Well, the first claim gave us a specific window, October 30th, 2017, between 7:45 and 8:30 in the morning Eastern Time. Hillary Clinton was supposed to be arrested, not investigated, not questioned, arrested. At the same time, we were told her passport would be flagged, that extradition was already in motion, that riots would follow, and that the National Guard would be activated across major cities. Well, October 30th comes and goes, and there is no arrest. There is no public record of detention. There is no confirmation from law enforcement. There is no credible report of extradition proceedings. Hillary Clinton continues her public life. She is seen, she is active, and she is not in custody. Oh, but she's wearing an ankle bracelet. Well, the second claim said that she was already detained. Well, that is not something that can be reinterpreted later. That is a present tense statement about reality, and that reality did not exist. When we look at the next layer, the expectation of riots, not general unrest, not isolated protest, massive organized riots tied directly to this event. Well, that does not happen. And there is no wave of unrest connected to a Clinton arrest because no arrest occurred. Then we look at the military component. The Post said the United States military would conduct the operation, that the National Guard would be activated across most major cities. Well, this was not described as a possibility. It was described as something already set in motion. But there is no nationwide National Guard activation tied to this scenario. There is no visible deployment that matches what was described. And there is no confirmation from any official source. But we wanted it to be because it felt good. The Posts were even provided a way to verify it. They said to locate a National Guard member and ask if they had been activated for duty on October 30th. Well, that was presented as proof. But the proof does not appear because the event does not even occur. And people are always activated at the National Guard. They're the state's army. And they're always on duty and always being activated for duty. Well, that was presented as proof. Then the timeline shifts to November 3rd. Well, then we had to wait a couple more days. Maybe it'll happen then. Then a new claim is introduced. Well, let's move off of Clinton. Let's go to John Podesta. We are told his arrest will be announced. Announced! And that this will trigger a larger sequence of events from the events that supposedly didn't happen prior. The following day, the language escalates. November 3rd is described as a big day. National Guard deployments are said to be starting. The phrase, the calm before the storm, is introduced as if everything is now about to break into open. November 3rd comes and goes, and there is no Podesta arrest. There's no announcement. There is no follow-up operation. There is no visible military movement connected to this claim whatsoever. So it immediately comes out, guns a-blazing, and misses every target. And we bought it. Just like October 30th, the day passes without the events that were clearly described. Now pause for a minute, because this is the most important part of the entire test. Nothing we just examined required interpretation. These were not coded messages. These were not symbolic references. They were not long-term prophecies that could unfold over years. These were immediate real-world claims tied to specific people, specific actions, and specific dates. And they did not happen. Not partially, not even in a way or a hidden way that later became visible. Not in a delayed form that eventually resurfaced. They did not happen the way they were said they would happen. And just as important as what did not happen is what also did not happen. There is no correction. There's no acknowledgement of error. There's no statement that the information was wrong. There's no retraction, and the timeline simply moves forward. So we're all going, all right, well, I guess the arrest did happen, but they're doing it all quietly. All right, look for clues, look for clues. Well, the claims fail, but the system continues. That should matter, because at this point, we are not dealing with interpretation. We're dealing with outcome. And when a claim is clear and the outcome does not match the claim, that's not misunderstanding. That is a failure. But what kind of spirit roped us in and got us all to just don't look at that part, the first part that never happened? What kind of spirit, or how were our own hearts hardened to the truth when the first claim comes out and did not happen, and the second claim came out and did not happen? Now the question becomes, what happens next? Because if this were a normal source, this is where credibility would end, and it should have. But that is not what happens here. Something changes, and that change is where the real story begins. So what we just walked through should have ended the story. It even rained today, and I'm still sneezing. It should have ended the story. What we just walked through. Clinton was arrested, neither was John Podesta. They're still roaming the streets, eating babies, drinking blood. That's what we're told, right? And I literally just told you the first two claims when Q started, which were verified by the Q entity through timestamps and its token, and it lied or just toyed with us. That should have ended the story, but clear claims were made here. Specific dates were given. Real-world events were described in advance, and those events did not happen. And in any normal situation, that is where credibility breaks. That is where a source either corrects itself or is no longer trusted. But we jumped into it. The source is no longer trusted. But that's not what happens here. Instead of correction, there's a shift. And it happens almost immediately. After the failed predictions of October 30th and November 3rd, the language begins to change. The tone becomes less direct. The statement becomes less concrete. Instead of telling the audience, hey, what's going on, what's going to happen, the posts begin asking the audience what they think is happening. Phrases start appearing that were not present at the beginning. Think logically. Why is this relevant? Coincidence? Well, the structure moves away from declarations and toward questions. And at first, that may seem like a big change, may not seem like a big change, but it actually is. Because questions do not carry the same accountability as statements. And Q came out right away making two important statements that did not come true, and then after started asking us questions. Well, a statement can be tested. A question actually invites interpretation. So then one of the most important lines in the entire archive appears. Then we see disinformation is necessary. It started off with two lies and then says, trust me, bro. That single phrase changes the rules of the system here. It should have been discredited right off the get-go. But for some reason, we were too lazy, too conditioned to really give a shit. Because we didn't. Because we would have said, hey, wait a minute. Logic, we didn't have any. We just went, Trump's going to save the world. Well, God doesn't make it so that when a person saves the world, that they get the glory. God always makes it so obvious that the world knows it wasn't that person at all. Then one of the most important lines, disinformation is necessary, comes in. So that single phrase changes the rules. So up to this point, the expectation was simple. Q would provide information, and that information could be tested against reality. But now a new layer is introduced. If something does not happen the way it was described, it may be wrong. It may be intentional. It may be part of a strategy. It may be disinformation. And that creates a problem. Just because you want it to be real doesn't mean it is. And because once disinformation is built into the system, failure is no longer failure. It becomes explainable. It becomes part of the plan. Trust the plan, bro. Disinformation is necessary. What? So that means everything we say is going to be bullshit, and that's necessary. Well, at the same time, another phrase begins to appear. Future proves past. That's my favorite one. This actually shifts the timeline of verification. Instead of judging a claim by what happens next, the audience is told to wait. Now, understanding will come later. Just hang tight. Well, what does not make sense now will make sense in the future. That's what they're trying to say. And that creates a second problem, because now the system no longer needs to be right in the present. It only needs to promise that it will be understood eventually. Then comes another shift, the introduction of the storm. Well, Trump said there's a storm coming, so it's Q. Well, at first, it is tied to specific expectations, arrests, military action, exposure, tribunals. It's been 9 years, folks. It didn't take them that long after World War II to give the Nazis tribunals. But after the initial dates fail, the storm becomes less defined. It becomes something that is always coming, always near, always just ahead. Well, how many times you got to bomb Iran before the storm hits? Well, it's not there yet. We got to bomb them some more. So it's no longer an event that can be pointed to on a calendar. It becomes an idea. And that is the pivot. The system moves from something that can be tested in real time to something that must be interpreted over time. Statements become suggestions. Predictions become possibilities. Outcomes become expectations. And because we all have suffered with an 8th grade education level, no one taught us about critical thinking. Because we are all designed to be workers, not philosophers or brainiacs. And as that happens, something else begins to change. The responsibility shifts. At the beginning, Q was responsible for being right. The posts made claims, and those claims stood or fell on their own. And after the pivot, all of us became responsible for making sense of the posts. Well, you got to decode it. Gave us all something to do so we wouldn't stand up against the government while they continued taking our freedoms. Then the reader is now expected to connect the dots, to see the patterns, to understand what is not being said directly. And assuming that the people can decode this before the government's secret service and intelligence agencies can't, is really not smart. Well, the people now know. Dude, come on. But I bought into it. I did. Because I wanted it to be real. And it made me lazy not to do my research. Okay? And this is where the system becomes much more powerful. Because now it doesn't rely only on what it is written. It relies on what the audience builds around it. And then people became coders, decoders. And once that happens, the system no longer is just a source of information anymore. It became a framework for belief. God's working with Q. And that is why the early failures do not end it. They actually ended up transforming it. Now, once the pivot takes place, something deeper begins to form beneath the surface. It's no longer just a shift in tone or language, it's a change in structure. The system begins to protect itself from being proven wrong. Now, at the beginning, the standard was simple. A claim was made, and a claim could be tested against reality. If it happened, the claim was validated. If it did not happen, the claim failed. And that is how truth normally works. But after the pivot, that standard no longer applies. Now there is a new layer introduced between the claim and the outcome. That layer is explanation. And not just explanation after the fact, but explanation built into the system itself. When the phrase disinformation is necessary, when that appears, it creates a condition where incorrect information is no longer evidence of failure. It becomes part of the design. It was quite brilliant in getting us to lay down our weapons and trust the plan, bro. It became something intentional. It becomes something that can always be justified. And at the same time, the phrase future proves past. Well, that removes the need for immediate verification. Instead of asking whether something happened when it was supposed to happen, the audience is told to wait. And what does not make sense now will make sense later. And what appears to fail now will be understood in the future. But it started up guns blazing. Nothing happened. Trust me, bro. Future proves past. Disinformation is necessary. Well, when those two ideas come together, they form a closed loop. If something happens the way it was suggested, it's taken as proof that the system is real. If something does not happen, it is explained as disinformation or part of a larger plan. And if nothing happens at all, the expectation is simply pushed forward. An endless loop. And thank God I got out of it. There is no longer a condition where the system can be definitely proven wrong. And that's the key point to this. Because once a system cannot be proven wrong, it no longer needs to be right. It only needs to continue. And so far, the whole Q thing is continued to this day. Because once a system cannot be proven wrong, it no longer needs to be right. It only needs to continue. And this is where belief begins to replace evidence. Not because people are unwilling to look at the facts, but because the structure they are inside no longer allows the facts to function the way they normally would. A failed prediction does not end the belief. It is absorbed into it. A missing event does not weaken the system. It is reinterpreted as part of the process. And over time, this creates a different kind of confidence. Not confidence based on results, but confidence based on continuity. And the system keeps going, so it must still be working. But that is not how truth works. Truth does not need to be protected from being tested. Truth does not need disinformation to help it along. The truth does not need the future or the past to prove it's true. Truth does not need to be built-in explanations for why it appears wrong. Because truth can stand on its own without adjustment, without reinterpretation, and without delay. And that is what makes this stage so important and deadly. Because from this point forward, the question no longer is just whether the original claims were accurate. The question becomes whether the system itself allows for accuracy to even matter. And this is why you've seen some articles of people writing about Q that it's one of the most deadliest, dangerous propaganda pieces that has come out since the misinformation, disinformation war. Because if it does not, then what remains is not a source of truth. It is a system of belief that sustains itself regardless of outcome. An endless loop of people trusting the plan, like the lawyer in Northern California who owns the Debt Clock website, who continues to post information that he believes is really happening. But that website does not belong to the government. It's a privately held website hosted on a normal hosting website, not on government servers. Now, by the time we move into 2018, just 1 year after Q came out, and guns a-blazing, predicting, don't happen, trust me, bro, the system has already changed. The early time-specific predictions are gone, and in their place is something much larger. The claims are no longer focused on a single arrest or a single date. They begin to describe an entire hidden operation, one that is supposedly unfolding across multiple institutions at the same time. The language becomes broader, more confident, and more expansive. In early 2018, the posts begin repeating phrases like, "Trust the plan," and then go even further, saying that action has taken place every single day. There are statements to say victories are happening constantly, that people are being taken down, that the system is being dismantled piece by piece, even if the public cannot see it yet. I've seen reports of people seeing black helicopters in their neighborhood. They're, "Q's taking someone out, woohoo!" Well, that is a different kind of claim here. It's no longer something that can be checked in a single day. It is something that has to be believed over time. Future proofs past. Disinformation is warranted. Well, at the same time, specific ideas begin to take shape inside this larger narrative. One of the biggest is the concept of sealed indictments. Remember we all bought in that? Oh my God, there's 150,000 sealed indictments. Well, the Post begin asking readers to think sealed indictments and to consider the possibility of tens of thousands of cases are already prepared, waiting to be unsealed at the right moment. Then numbers are introduced that sound massive, far beyond anything the public has seen before. Well, we didn't think that there were ever any sealed indictments ever in the United States. And we automatically assume that the number of sealed indictments are all the bad guys. Well, sealed indictments are nothing new. We've had them since the beginning of a court system. But the numbers that were introduced sounded massive, far beyond anything the public has ever seen before. And if we think of 100,000 sealed indictments nationwide, and we don't think about our population of 340 million Americans, and that 100,000 sealed indictments doesn't seem like such a stretch to believe that there are other court cases besides Q working on all the bad guys. Okay. Numbers are introduced that sound massive. And then there's the focus on personnel changes. The audience is told to look at resignations, filings, firings, and leadership shifts across government, law enforcement, and even corporate positions. Well, these are presented not as isolated events, but as evidence of a coordinated purge happening behind the scenes. Well, CEOs get fired all the time. Scientists die. They do. There's scientists keep coming out of universities, though. Millions of them. And yeah, scientists do go on hikes and get ravaged by coyotes and stuff. Another key element is the introduction of investigative figures such as John Huber. The posts point to him as part of a larger operation, suggesting that teams of investigators are working across multiple states building cases that will eventually lead to a sweeping public reckoning. Now, this is where the system becomes more convincing because it's no longer relying on only predictions. It is attaching itself to real things, real events. These are resignations in government. There are changes in leadership. Trump keeps hiring people left and right. Is that because he's arresting people? Firing people that you guys and they too believed in Q. There are sealed cases in the legal system. There are. All of those things are real. And when they're presented together, it creates the appearance of a pattern. Oh my God, it's really happening. I bought it. I get it. But there is a difference between a pattern and a conclusion. The posts do not just point to these events. They assign meaning to them. They tell the audience what these things represent. They tell them that all of these things all of these separate events are actually connected, that they are part of a single coordinated effort moving toward a final outcome. Well, are we there yet? No, we invaded Iran. Was that part of Q's plan? Well, we got to invade Iran. No, we're helping Israel in the Middle East expand. Is that Q's plan too? This tells the audience that these things, what these things represent. And it tells us all of these things are separate events, but they're actually connected. And we all think it's a single coordinated effort moving forward towards a final outcome that we all wanted, tribunals. And that's the claim that has to be tested. Because while the individual pieces may be real, the connection between them is not automatically proven. The existence of resignations does not prove a coordinated purge. The existence of sealed cases does not prove a mass indictment operation. The presence of an investigation does not prove that it is part of a hidden unified plan. And that is where the system relies on the audience. The reader is expected to look at these events, accept the interpretation, and see them as confirmation. Over time, the volume of information increases, and the sense that something big must be happening, something big, becomes stronger. Even if no single event clearly proves it, but as time passes, the expected outcome still does not arrive. And there is no moment where tens of thousands of indictments are unsealed in a coordinated way. There is no, seriously, 150,000 sealed indictments. How long would it take? And how big of a court do you need? And how are you going to house all these people in prison to get them through this trial? There's no single event where mass arrests take place across multiple sectors. There is no public unified exposure that matches the scale that was being suggested. But the narrative continues. The expectation continues. The sense that something is building continues because we wanted it to, and we didn't want to take the responsibility ourselves. Because it's us who are responsible for putting these leaders in. And it's us who fell for this propaganda piece. Yeah, I'm blaming us, me, and you. And I'm trying to help me and you repent from being lazy and allowing the government to do stuff like this, if it was even the government. I found ties to Craig Oxley. I found ties to the Tavistock Institute. I found ties to that dentist guy in London, but I don't have the full evidence in front of me to actually 100% prove that it was Craig Oxley that posted on Q. That's where I have to be honest. I have to say it looked like it, but if I don't have the evidence, I only have evidence that Craig Oxley and this guy is the same person. That's it. But not that Craig Oxley is the one who logged into 4chan and started posting. But the way that Q posted and the way that Craig Oxley posted. My evidence shows that it's the same thing, but it's not proof yet. I needed more. So the visual result does not match the scale of the claim. And that is the key point to this stage here. The system has moved away from being testable in a short term, but it has not become testable in the long term either. It has simply become broader. And as it becomes broader, it becomes harder to challenge, not because it is more accurate, but because it is less defined. But the truth does not become stronger by becoming harder to test. It becomes stronger by being able to stand up to testing, no matter how clear the claim is. And by this point in the timeline, the system is no longer offering that kind of clarity. It is offering something else. It's offering a growing narrative that feels connected, even when it has not been proven to be. They've asked Trump in public about Q. He says he has no idea when the hell it is. And then they asked him just recently about Q, like a couple of years ago. He's like, yeah, I've heard of it. It just has nothing to do with me. Well, everything that Q has said and what Trump has done are opposite. Everything that was promised to us hasn't come true. Just because it feels right doesn't mean it is. Just because it feels truthful doesn't mean it is. Now, by this stage, something has changed that is not immediately obvious. But it is one of the most powerful parts of the entire system. The posts are no longer just delivering information. They are starting to shape behavior. Earlier, the audience was being told what would happen. Then they were asked to interpret what might be happening. Now they are being invited to participate in building the meaning itself. The language reflects this shift. The posts begin encouraging readers to research, to dig, to connect the dots. Instead of providing complete explanations, they provide just simple fragments. And instead of delivering conclusions, they provide pieces that require assembly. Now, at first, that can feel empowering. It gives the impression that the audience is not being controlled, but engaged. And this is where we saw some of the stuff that Q was trying to get us involved, saying, you guys are part of it. And when we heard General Flynn say, we've got keyboard warriors. Yeah, just a bunch of people trying to research stuff that's classified. It creates a sense that people are discovering truth for themselves rather than being told what to believe. It feels like participation instead of instruction. Well, why not start out your whole Q message that way? Why did you start out saying Hillary's getting arrested next to John Podesta? Now you need to trust the plan. Now you need to know that disinformation is a must and future proofs past. It feels like participation instead of instruction. All right. But there's something deeper happening underneath that. Because when a system requires the audience, you guys, to complete the message, it also transfers responsibility. The meaning is no longer fully contained in what is written. It is created in the mind of the reader. And that's what we call propaganda. And once that happens, the system gains a new kind of strength. Now, when someone finds a connection between two events, it reinforces their belief. When they discover a pattern, it feels like confirmation. When they share that pattern with others, it spreads the framework even further. But those connections are not always coming from the original source. They're coming from the audience. This is where the system becomes self-sustaining. This is why it's lasted so long. It no longer depends entirely on new, accurate information being provided. It depends on the continuous activity of those who believe in it. Just like the person who owns the website government debt clock, .gov. It's actually owned by a lawyer in Northern California, not the Navy or any organization owned by the government. The more people research, the more connections are made, and the more connections, the stronger the belief appears. And over time, the line between what was originally said and what has been built around it begins to blur. Hi, Carrie. We'll talk about that on TikTok later. So this is why the system can continue even when specific claims fail, because the belief is no longer tied only to those claims. It is tied to the entire network of ideas that has been constructed around them. And at that point, the system does not need to be consistently right. It only needs to keep people engaged. And believe me, blogs, TikTok, X, dude, everyone went nuts. Basically putting out decodes. And that engagement creates a sense of momentum. It feels like progress, even if no clear outcome has been reached. It feels like discovery, even if the conclusions are not grounded in verified results. Out of all the crap about Jeffrey Epstein and Washington and baby eaters and blood drinkers, the only real arrest was what? Harvey Weinstein? I mean, the real arrest? Yeah, Jeffrey got arrested. But their buddies let him go. I don't believe he killed himself. I believe that, hey, he got caught. Now he's in another country. I can't prove it. But this is also where confirmation begins to replace verification. Instead of asking whether something is true based on evidence, the focus shifts to whether something fits the pattern that has already been accepted. Now, if it fits, it's embraced. If it does not, it's ignored or explained away. And this is where the system becomes very difficult to break, because people are engaged in it and they're completely all in and they will not let go. Because they're no longer just challenging a set of claims, they're challenging a structure that people have helped build themselves. They're now a part of it. And this is also where discernment becomes most important. We should have grounded all of this in the Bible in the first place. Where did God tell his people to trust the plan and go do your research? And also tell them that the emperor will die or the Pharaoh's going to die on this day. That's not how God works. But propaganda since World War I, in fact, since the French Revolution, has been perfected to steer public opinion, to get us engaged in something else while the government or special interests, are working on something that you may not want in your set of laws. Because truth does not require you to complete it. It doesn't need you to finish it. It's truth. Truth does not rely on your ability to connect fragments in order to exist. Truth stands on its own, whether or not you participate in it. And when a system begins to rely on your participation to sustain its meaning, well, it's no longer simply presenting truth. It's asking you to help create it. And that's a very different thing. And by the time we reach 2019, the system is no longer relying on earlier predictions or even expanding abstract ideas. Q begins attaching itself directly to major real-world events. And this is where the movement becomes the most convincing, because now it is no longer speaking in isolation. It is speaking alongside things everyone can see. And one of the most significant moments is the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein in 2019. Well, this was not a rumor. This was not hidden. It was real, documented event involving serious criminal charges tied to trafficking and abuse. The posts surrounding this event quickly frame it as something much larger, suggesting that it is only the beginning of a massive exposure that will reach into governments and institutions. Well, did it? No. Did it? No. Who went to jail? Jeffrey. Not the victims, or not the perpetrators who worked with Jeffrey. And for many people, this felt like confirmation. Oh my God, they arrested him. It's happening. It's happening. Q's for real. Well, because here something was real, something dark, something hidden that had come into the open. And most likely, the government saw the people were starting to research the government. They needed to put in a fall guy, so we can stop researching all of the prostitutes that come in and out of Washington, D.C. And it really did look like the first domino was falling, and it looked like the beginning of everything that the system had been pointing toward. But what matters is not just that something real happened. What matters is whether it led where it was said it would lead. It's been 7 years since he was arrested, and nobody else, except for the rumors of the Hillary Clinton emails and the rumors. And again, this is all rumor. We can't, unless it's put in court cases, it's hearsay. Or what WikiLeaks showed from emails that were supposedly stolen by Russia, given to the Wiki guy. So the expectation was not just that Epstein would be arrested. The expectation was that this arrest would trigger a chain reaction, and it did not. That it would expose networks, lead to widespread accountability, and begin the larger takedown that had been described since the beginning. And then every post or every headline that you've seen about some human trafficking arrest, it's the Q movement. No, they get arrested every year. Then they go underground and start their thing again. And it did not happen the way that it was presented. So there was no coordinated wave of mass arrests tied to that event at all. There was no public unveiling of a unified system of control that matched the scale of what had been suggested. And yet everyone believed that at Panama, the evergreen boat that went like this was full of people, packed full of people. Human trafficking. And the Marines went in with divers and saved all of the people. I mean, we took it so far where it just became ridiculous. The event was real, Jeffrey Epstein, but the framework placed around it did not unfold as promised. And the same pattern appears with the Durham investigation. This was a real inquiry into the origins of the Russian investigation-related matters. It involved real officials, real processes, and real legal authority. And the Post began linking the investigation to the larger narrative, suggesting that it would be part of a much broader operation that would expose corruption at the highest levels. Well, who went to jail? No one. And again, this created the appearance of alignment. But over time, the outcome did not match the expectation. The investigation did not produce the sweeping public reckoning that had been implied. It did not lead to the kind of coordinated exposure that would confirm the larger system as it had been described. It remained what it was, a real investigation with limited defined results. Then there's the issue of the Biden family and foreign business dealings. The Post pointed toward this early, suggesting corruption, influence, and compromised relationships. Later, this became a major political issue, with reports and investigations examining financial transactions and international connections. And this is one of those areas where the system appears closest to something real. But again, the distinction matters. Pointing toward a real controversy is not the same as accurately describing the outcomes of that controversy. The broader claim was not just that questionable dealings existed. The broader claim was that these issues were part of a larger hidden structure that would be exposed through a coordinated process. Did Biden go to jail? No. Did his son? Well, kind of, but not really. Did anybody go to jail for taking money under the table from Chinese companies or Ukraine companies? No. We were told it would. We were told it's going to lead to a huge mass execution of the bad players. But the large exposure did not occur in the way that it was described. And this is the pattern that repeats across this stage. Real events happen. Real investigations take place. Yes. Real controversies emerge, and each one is pulled into the system and given a specific meaning. They're presented as pieces of a single unfolding plan that is moving forward a final moment. But that final moment does not arrive and never did, and the system continues to build expectation. It continues to reinforce the idea that everything is connected. It continues to suggest that the outcome is inevitable. But the visible results remain limited to the individual events themselves. There's no unified breakthrough. There's no single moment where the full structure is revealed in a way that was implied. And this is where the difference between reality and framework become clear. Because reality is made up of separate events, each with its own context and outcome. And the framework takes those events and connects them into a single narrative. And the more powerful the events are, the more convincing the narrative becomes. But convincing is not the same as truth. And by this point in the timeline, the system is no longer being tested by isolated predictions. It's being tested by whether the entire structure it has built actually it comes together. And so far, it is not. So by the time we reach the end of 2020, everything that has been built throughout the archive is now facing its final test. And this is no longer about isolated claims or individual events or patterns that need to be interpreted. This is the moment where the entire framework either comes together or it does not. But up to this point, the system has told the audience that there is a plan, and it has said that the action is happening behind the scenes, and it has said that justice is unfolding, even if it cannot be fully seen yet. And more than anything, it has repeated one idea over and over and over again. Nothing can stop what is coming. Well, that's not a suggestion. That's a statement of certainty. At the 2020 election approaches, the language becomes even more direct. The posts reinforce the idea that previous narratives have failed, that attempts to undermine leadership have not succeeded, and that the outcome ahead will reflect that. At the same time, concerns about corruption, influence, and compromise are raised, especially in relation to political figures who may take power. Well, the expectation is not subtle. It's clear that someone or something decisive is supposed to happen. Then the election takes place. Votes are counted, results are reported, legal challenges are filed, recounts are conducted, certifications move forward, and through all of it, the expectation remains that something will interrupt the process, that something will emerge, that something will change the outcome. But step by step, the process continues. The results are certified. The transition proceeds. And as January of 2021, the inauguration takes place. And at this point, the question is no longer open because the expectation was not simply that events were unfolding behind the scenes. This expectation was that these events would eventually break into the open in a way that they would not be ignored. And that there would be a visible, undeniable moment where everything came together. Well, that moment does not arrive, and it never did. There's no coordinated public exposure that matches the scale that has been suggested. So there is no mass arrest event. There is no military intervention that alters the outcome, no final reversal that aligns with the certainty that had been expressed. And yet, even at this stage, the language does not shift toward acknowledgement. It reinforces the same message. Nothing can stop what is coming. The expectation continues, even as the outcome has already taken place. And this is where the system reaches its breaking point, because now the difference between the claim and the reality is no longer a matter of interpretation. It's no longer something that can be explained by timing or perspective. The outcome has occurred, and it does not match the expectations that was set. And this is the moment where everything that has been built must be evaluated as a whole. Not just the earlier predictions, not just the patterns or the individual events, but the central idea that has been carried from the beginning to this point, that a hidden operation was unfolding in a way that would eventually become visible and undeniable. So that idea has now been fully testable. And what's placed beside reality, it does not hold. The system continues to speak, but the outcome has already been revealed. So at this point, we're no longer looking at isolated moments. We're no longer testing single claims or individual events. We now have the full record in front of us, from the first drop to the final outcome, and that allows us to see the system as a whole. And when you step back and look in sequence, a clear pattern emerges. It begins with bold, direct claims, specific names, dates, events, arrests are supposed to happen, military operations, timelines are given with confidence, but these are all the kinds of statements that can be tested quickly, and they are, and they fail. And what follows is not correction, but adaption. That's not good. It continues. It lied, and then it got even more lies. Statements became questions. Certainty becomes suggestions. Phrasing like disinformation is necessary, and future proofs past. Must I go on? So tonight was never about winning an argument. It was about asking a simple question and being willing to follow the answer wherever it leads. I took the original posts, the actual words, the actual dates, and placed them beside the real-world record. Not filtered, not reinterpreted, not protected. And what I found was not complicated. The early claims were clear and they did not come to pass, and the system did not correct itself. Instead, it changed its structure. It moved from statements to questions, from predictions to interpretations, from accountability to explanations, and it expanded into a larger narrative pulled in real-world events and relied on the audience to sustain its meaning. And when the moment came where everything was supposed to be revealed, it did not happen the way that it was said it would happen. So that's not a personal attack on anyone who believed it. That is the record. Q is bunk. Because the danger is not just that something was wrong. The danger is how something that was wrong was able to feel so right. It spoke into real frustration. It pointed at real corruption. It gave people a sense that justice was coming and that truth was being revealed. And for a time, that was enough to hold belief in place, even when the outcomes did not match the claims. Satan loves doing this shit on us, laughing his ass off as we go, oh, Q, and waving the Q flag. The truth cannot be built on what feels right. It has to be tested. And when it's tested, it has to stand. Scripture does not leave us without guidance in this. We are told to prove all things. We are told that if something is spoken and it does not come to pass, it was not from God. And I'm talking about that dude who's continuing prophesying what's happening right now in the world. I'm not trying to be harsh, but I'm trying to protect people. It is there so we are not carried by every voice that sounds convincing in the moment. So the question is not whether people were wrong to look for the truth. No. The question is whether what they were given was the truth. And based on the evidence, it was not what it claimed to be. And here's the part that matters the most. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I just get a note from Daffy. The black nobility rule this realm until we the people take our sovereignty back. Nothing changes. Nobody is coming to save us. We must save ourselves. I've been saying that all along. It starts with your heart. You can expose the black nobility, the 13 illuminated. You can expose the East and the West and all of that. Nothing will change unless you change your heart first. So I agree with you in some aspects. It's about learning how to test everything that claims to speak the truth. It's about making sure that the next time something comes along that feels right, you have the tools now to ask the right questions. It's about us now not falling for that again, because we did. And the same thing happened to Russia. where the anti-Bolsheviks were told to lay down their weapons, trust in the Romanovs, trust the plan, everyone's going to be okay. And Russia, they lost. And more than anything, it's about returning to a foundation that does not shift. That's the Bible. Not a hidden voice, not an anonymous source, but truth that can be tested, confirmed, and trusted. Am I right? Not a hidden voice, not an anonymous source. Let's not fall for that again. This has been Cause Before Symptom, where we don't chase symptoms. We test the cause against the truth. My name is James Carner, and if you're interested in my sources, they'll be up on my website. I really hate being wrong on these things because I really wanted Q to be right, but unfortunately, we all fell for it. It was a program, an operation to keep us from standing up and taking our country back physically, and it worked. Trump got his way, everyone else got their way, and the money continues to flow. Nothing we can do about that except to change our hearts. God bless you, God keep you, God thank you. We'll see you mañana.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner. Go to his website, jamescarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.